If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
Thank you, James. Always a pleasure. A lovely person to have known James for far too long, according to his wife. Anyway, James O'Neill there with the news. Before we get into our first guest, a couple of things. First of all, the EU under Queen von der Leyen, I mean, it's Ursula, of course, Ursula von der Leyen, hand-me-down from the Viking age. Anyway, she's very excited because she's going to create in Europe a Ministry of Truth. Cam, if you could play Ministry of Truth.
And honourable members, the rise in information manipulation and disinformation, as we hear, is dividing our societies. It is not only eroding trust in the truth, but also in democracy itself. This is why we urgently need the European Democracy Shield. We need more capacity to monitor and detect information manipulation and disinformation. So we will set up a new European Centre for Democratic Resilience. This will bring together the expertise and capacity of member states and neighbouring countries. You obviously are fearing this new centre.
Okay, I understand that shouting has become a little bit of a tradition. Can you listen, please, to this discussion, and then you'll have the time to speak?
In some communities across Europe, traditional media are struggling. In many rural areas, the days of going out for a local paper is a nostalgic memory. This has created many news deserts where disinformation thrives, and this is so dangerous for our democracy. Because informed citizens who can trust what they read and hear are essential to keep those in power accountable. And when independent media is dismantled or neutralized, our ability to monitor corruption and preserve democracy is severely weakened. This is why the first step, listen careful, this is why the first step in an autocrat's playbook is always to capture independent media. Because this enables backsliding and corruption to happen in the dark. So we need to do more to protect our media and our independent press. And this is why we will launch a new media resilience program. And this media resilience program will support independent journalism and media literacy, but we also need to invest to address some of the root causes of this threat. This is why in the next budget we have proposed to significantly boost funding for media. We also need to enable private equity. We will therefore use our tools to support independent and local media. A free press is the backbone of any democracy, and we will support Europe's press to remain free despite your shouting.
Despite your shouting, you have free speech, but we will shoot you if you say what we don't want you to say. I mean, give me a break. I mean, that's just terrible. I mean, they just want to shut you down, the Minister of Truth. They go, we will fund independent media. Sorry, I have to say, that is just disgusting. But what about this? Our next guest will be interested that we have electricity after he hears this bit. Anthony Albanese, our magnificent Prime Minister, He talks a bit like, he's dreadful. Anyway, Anthony Albanese, he's so excited. I'm so excited that in December we have this thing called the what is it? It's e-safety something. Anyway, it means that unless under 16 and under, you can't log in unless you do your facial recognition, iRobot, that sort of stuff. You can't do any of that unless you log in, and then you can't go to Google, you can't go to any socials at all. And then I read yesterday in the national newspaper here, which was etched in stone, they said it was 18. So I'm not sure. Have they moved up the age a bit? And what they want to do is just basically nobble free speech. Cam, if you could play Applaud, please.
Anthony, I want to thank you and Emma for bringing us here together. This is a bold decision that you have taken, and it's an example of what determined countries can do. Since the announcement of Australia's landmark minimum age law, I've been watching very closely. And I've been inspired by Australia's example. You're the first to give this a try. And when your loud critics tell you, I guess this won't work, that can't be done, the tech genie cannot be put back in the bottle, etc., you are persistent. We in Europe are watching and will be learning from you as you implement your world-first and world-leading social media ban. It is, of course, also a hot topic discussed and debated in the European Union. Prime Minister, as I've said before, when it comes to the EU-Australia relationship, there is no distance between our democracies. The same goes for good ideas. I look forward to working with you on this. Thank you very much. And Emma, again, thank you very much for sharing Tilly's story with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just love you, Anthony. I love you. I love you. I love you. You worked out a way to shut these people up. I just truly, it's terrible. It's terrible. Almost makes you want to cry. Here's Anthony Albanese. I'm flying to New York to go to the United Nations, and I'm going to meet up with Donald Trump. He did both. He went to the United Nations and showed the world what 1984 is looking like more and more. And that will be on display in Australia when we, just think, you have to log in. You have to use biometrics. Then they're bringing the digital ID, digital currency, all digital. They will be able to control you. And that's what it's about. In fact, one of our opposition, who's on the side of democracy, says, government must control the internet. We've got to stop people saying things we don't like. Give me a break. But it's very, very sad because, oh, by the way, Albanese, UN, and he met up with Donald Trump for about 5 seconds, had a photo op. He doesn't want to even talk to our Prime Minister. It's terrible. It's terrible. I bet you Iceland would get an invitation. But Elon Musk, here's something about Elon. And it makes a lot of sense. He says you can tell which side is a good side and which side is a bad side by which side wishes to restrict freedom of speech. Cam, Elon Musk.
Tell which side is the good side and which side is the bad side by which side wishes to restrict freedom of speech. The side that is restricting freedom of speech, that would have been sort of the Hitler, Stalin, Mussolinis of the world. They had very strong censorship, very strong restrictions on speech. That's one of the signs that they are the bad guys. And so, in fact, a restriction on speech and large government is fundamentally fascist, obviously. So, ironically, in pushing for censorship, it makes it very clear that the left is the side that is against freedom, and freedom of speech is simply one of many freedoms that we should have as a civil society. because ideas should win on the strength of their arguments. They should not win because they are suppressed.
Our next guest is from Florida. Keith Gross is a legal analyst, former assistant state attorney and prosecutor for the state of Florida. He is an author of a new book called Dirt to Runways, Defending the American Dream for the Next Generation. Keith, thanks for joining us. You're in Panama City. I used to hang out there. I almost worked at a radio station there. And tell me, do you frequent Pineapple Willie's?
You know, I really don't. I think that's where visitors go, but no, I pretty much eat at home.
You're sensible, but I'd have to say Panama City and Panama City Beach and right up to Pensacola and stuff, absolutely magnificent coastline and views. It's just magnificent. So lovely part of the world, and you're probably still enjoying warm weather. Tell me about your book. What made you write the book? And I need to ask a question after you've told us about that. Do you think the American dream is just slowly vanishing?
Well, I do believe that the American dream is vanishing, and that is largely what drove me to write the book in the first place. The book's just a tale of my growing up. You know, I grew up in the northern Florida area, which has about as many cows as it has people in the area I grew up. It's not down on the beach. Pineapple Willie's was just for visits. We didn't live down there when I was a youngster. So growing up in rural North Florida, I was happy to be raised by a lot of folks that had common sense wisdom, a lot of just obvious things that we should think everyone would agree on. And we don't today. You know, looking at that clip you played just a moment ago of 2013 BBC, you know, back then they had common sense. Certainly in rural North Florida, when I was growing up, they had common sense as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? One thing, because I lived in the US for a great chunk of my life and always wanted to, and the two reasons. One, if you put your head down and your backside up, the American people supported you. They wanted you to succeed. And I thought that was unique to the US. And secondly, is that you could have a conversation, maybe have a drink or two or whatever, but have that conversation. And when that conversation was finished, it was finished. There was no animosity or ill feeling. Nowadays, you can't, in many places, you look at California, they're doing everything they can now to crunch free speech. That's a pity, because that's what made America so great, was being able to say what was on your mind and then get on with life. And it's changed, hasn't it?
It's definitely changed. You know, the assassination of Charlie Kirk really brought that issue to a head. He was doing the right thing. He was out having conversations with people who had different opinions, and he was changing hearts and minds by having civil conversations. You know, that's the only way that we can come to any sort of policy conclusions in any country, but that's how we do it in America. We have civil discussions with people. It's getting harder to do. It was getting harder for a while, and I think we really reached a turning point with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We're going to have to get back to the point where we can have reasonable conversations. It certainly relies on a strong protection for freedom of speech, because, you know, we have that here in America, that we have this First Amendment protection, and it wasn't designed to protect kind, polite speech. It was designed to protect speech which others may disagree with. And we have to preserve that, not just here in our country, but worldwide. Freedom of speech is the most fundamental bedrock of being able to air your grievances and come to policy conclusions.
It's amazing how, I mean, I just look at the, in California with Gavin Newsom. And same thing in the UK and Australia, we believe in free speech, except when you say something we don't like. And they, if you say a hurty thing, inverted commas, hurty thing, which I saw on X one day describing Starmer's laws in the UK, if you say a hurty thing, then we're going to complain to the police. And if you look at it in the UK, 12,000 per year are arrested because of online posts about saying hurty things. I mean, and I always say that the US is still way in front. But if you have those sort of laws that you can't say what's on your mind without threatening to kill someone, or do damage to them, if you can't say what's on your mind, then we are in trouble. And as a part B of that one, by the way, Keith, Pam Bondi said something that alarmed me. She said, we're going to stamp out hate speech. And hate speech is subjective to the person judging it. And I thought that was a fairly dangerous thing. You don't want the US trying to do the right thing, inverted commas here, and moving in with hate speech. And then you got another bad actor coming in, another administration coming in and saying, oh, that's bad speech, that's hate speech, and shutting that down. You don't want that. How do we protect ourselves?
Well, in America, our First Amendment does protect hate speech. Hate speech might be vile, but it's still protected speech here. I've seen a lot of reports in the UK of people being arrested for coming out and saying things which are pretty obvious, which is the place is being overrun by migration and they want to see fewer immigrants. That seems like a pretty obvious conclusion from an outsider, and people are being arrested for raising that obvious conclusion in their home country. Fortunately, in the United States, we also have the Second Amendment, where virtually every American citizen is armed. And I think that's really a significant deterrent from a government becoming so tyrannical that they would dare to knock down our door and arrest us for a Facebook post.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I've seen there's a video that's circulating at this. The police rolled up to have a conversation and to arrest a young girl who said something that they didn't like. They said was racist, something. I mean, it wasn't. Anyway, the arresting officer was of that particular race, and it just seemed ironical that. And they had another clip in the UK that a young boy, 6 years old, came home from school, and the mother said, "Oh yes," filming it, quite proud that her child was going to school, and said, "What did you learn at school?" He said, "Did you learn about God?" And the young kid said, "No, you mean Allah. Allah created everything." And that was a normal, it was just a normal, person in the UK with a 5 or 6 year old child off to school. And they've been taught in a Western democracy that Allah was the one that created the universe. Pretty bad, isn't it?
It is surprising. We've seen a fair bit of censorship here in America too, though. Back, if you remember, during COVID, we had doctors that were being stripped of their medical licenses if they dared to speak out against the idea that diapers on your face and plexiglass and untested vaccines were the salvation that it was supposed to be. Even social media accounts were being blocked and taken offline of prominent politicians who dared to question the party narrative on COVID. So certainly there's a reasonable concern that everyone should have when someone comes out and says they're going to stop hate speech or they're going to stop misinformation or establish a ministry of truth. That's Orwellian. We're already going the wrong direction in the world. We need to turn this boat around and get back to the idea of universal freedoms.
In Australia, we had this e-safety thing kicking off in December, and it means that every person has got to use biometrics to look into the phone or to the computer to be able to verify who they are. And that itself is a Pandora's box. I think that's just a disastrous thing. But to see that Europe is excited under von der Leyen, excited that they can also do the same thing, and we'll be watching you. It's a scary world we live in. Just to talk about the rights of people in the US, each state has a sort of a different colour to it. I mean, look at California. They're brought in this new law now. That means, and they rushed it through. That was signed, sealed, and delivered on at the funeral, the day the funeral of Charlie Kirk happened. And it will limit you. It's the same as the UK. They can come and knock on your door as a prosecutor and practicing law. What chance in hell do they have of making a charge stick, or can states do what they like and butcher your First Amendment?
No, fortunately, in America, we have all of the rights spelled out by our first several amendments, But then we also have a 14th Amendment, which effectively applies all of the other amendments to the states, not just to the federal government. So we routinely see illogical acts like we're seeing with California, where they try to pass laws which are ultimately going to be struck down in the courts. They do this all the time with respect to gun laws. They'll ban certain types of firearms, and then it's just a matter of time until the Supreme Court strikes that down because it interferes with your Second Amendment right. The same will be true, but much faster with the First Amendment, because the First Amendment is far less controversial and will be protected much faster.
Can you just tell me, because you're a prosecutor for, I don't believe you're still doing it now, but a former state prosecutor for Florida. Obviously, you dealt with bad people. Can you tell me why it took so long to brand Antifa as a terrorist org?
You know, I think we just needed a president willing to come out and speak the truth. Consequences be darned. And that's one thing that we can certainly rely on President Donald Trump to do. He's going to tell it like he sees it. He's not worried about whether or not it offends people. If it needs to be said, he's going to say it. And Antifa has been terrorizing communities, going back for several years now. They were rioting in Portland, Oregon, and destroying buildings. Probably the most complicated thing about declaring them a terrorist organization is that, at least to date, I'm not aware of any clear organizational structure. There must obviously be some organizational structure because they seem to have plenty of money and plenty of time to do things other than work. So I'm hopeful that our government will get to the bottom of that. And, free speech is one thing. Rioting and burning down buildings and burning down cars and blocking highways, that's not free speech. That's criminal activity.
Yeah, and it was seemed to be mainly in those in the blue states, which in many cases, if you looked at the riots, they were supported by those the legislature or the local councils, and it's very hard to prosecute, especially if you're a policeman, to charge someone with a riotous act if they're the ones that are employing you.
Absolutely, we've seen it recently with immigration laws. We've got millions of illegal aliens here in our nation, and the left in our country is really up in arms about the idea that these people should be deported. The law requires that they be deported. The president is following the law, and he's being labeled a fascist and called a Nazi, and they come with all of these terms, which is causing a real outbreak of violence lately, where we have a lot of people who somehow believe that violence is now a righteous act against these Nazi fascists. The use of these dehumanizing words has made violence an acceptable idea for the left. So we've got to find a way for people to accept reality, which is that the president's not doing something wrong by enforcing the law. If you don't like the law, change it, but don't blame the president for enforcing it.
Most things that Donald Trump is doing internally is, and probably eternally too, but is I'm supportive, right up to the top of the jar. I mean, this guy is doing what has been needed to have been done. Internationally, I'm not too sure on that one. I think he's floundering at times. But take away all that, within the US, he's mainly doing the right moves. But your federal budget deficit has grown by from 92 billion to 2 trillion. Is that are the alarm bells ringing, and how do we fix that?
The alarm bells are definitely going off all across both parties. Definitely more concerned people exist on the Republican Party side of things. So you've got a divide even within the Republican Party, where you've got a lot of conservatives, myself included, who want to see serious cuts because we can't afford this much government. That's just the reality. We can't keep taxing our citizens as high as we're taxing them and still spending dramatically more than we're bringing in tax revenue. Our current debt is now $37 trillion and growing. We can't keep doing this. But we don't see a consensus across both parties in Congress on how to get that expense cut down to a more manageable size. Everyone seems to want to lower taxes, but no one seems to want to cancel the government programs funded by those taxes. A lot of people on the Republican side, particularly the conservative Republicans like myself, want to see the federal government shrunk down to size, down to the original mandate as outlaid by our founding fathers, which would have a very small federal government primarily focused on national defense, and it would leave most of the other day-to-day functions, running schools and fire departments and paving roads and such, to the individual states.
Just as we wrap up, because we are running out of time now, your book, it's sort of like an inspirational book on how to use these experiences to move forward. I was always told that the secret of success, there is no secret. It's simply you roll up your sleeves, you put your head down, you bottom up, and you work really, really, really hard. And then you may just get there. Would you agree with that? Or do you think, because using your experience, because I've noticed that you were in the National Guard and went to law school after that and so forth, similar story. You put your head down, you bottom up, and you work really, really hard. Any other little bits to add to that?
Well, that was certainly my experience. It was mostly hard work. I mean, nothing was handed to me. I came from a family that had basically nothing and built multiple national companies by delaying gratification, showing up early, staying late, and working hard. There were a lot of things that I probably could have purchased along the way that I didn't, because I reinvested pretty much every dime I made into our businesses until they grew to a national level. I think that delayed gratification, aligning your personal expenditures with your professional objectives, that was really key. And it's not about luck. It's about hard work. If you want luck, work harder. That's what I learned.
I totally agree with you. Do you think when I was at college doing journalism, I had a part-time job at McDonald's, of all places, just to get me through college. And they used to employ a lot of the military. And they said they employed the military because they had these great systems. They knew what to do, and there's a bit of pressure, at Macca's in those days. And you got lots of customers, but they knew what to do. Do you find that by being with the military, it's also a good reference when things get tough and when you need to put in systems in place that you can always go back to the basics, and that being the military?
In some respects, yes. I mean, in the Army, you certainly learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You also learn that you succeed as a team. I don't know how many times, when I was in the military, we had a situation where one person on the team would do the wrong thing and everyone had to pay the price. So certainly when you talk about, an organization like McDonald's, a store, if something's going wrong on one side of the restaurant, I suspect everyone else is going to help fix that, because that's what you learn in the military. You learn how to work as a team, solve problems together, and ensure that the mission ultimately succeeds.
Your book, Dirt to Runways, Defending the American Dream for the Next Generation, available, I would imagine, at all good and bad bookstores.
Indeed. It's at barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com. It is an audiobook on Audible, if you like to listen to books. And you can follow me online at Keith Gross FL.
Absolutely fantastic. Keith Gross, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy this very much. Your book, obviously, it's not a how-to, but it's a book of inspiration, and shows you that anybody can have success. Simply roll up your sleeves, put your head down, you bottom up, do the right thing, and God willing, you will get there. Keith Gross, thank you very much. This is The World Today.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
Dr Richard Boles is a leading researcher in the treatment of mitochondrial dysfunction and autism. Doctor, thanks for joining us. Before we get into anything of intelligence, which I will not be part of, but I have to say that the furor of what Donald Trump has said about Tylenol, for example, it would be almost the Trump derangement syndrome that is circulating the world. So, for example, he could walk across the Hudson. Headlines would be, Donald Trump can't swim. And so when he comes out with something, along with Robert Kennedy Jr., of saying that Tylenol, for example, can affect pregnancy and can, there may be a chance of autism the whole world seems to jump up and down and say that he's completely wrong, blah blah blah. In fact, there were posts about pregnant women taking 4 or 5 tablets, Tylenol tablets, just to show that Donald Trump is wrong. First of all, that is not wise, is it? And why is the medical and pharma establishment again at war with Robert Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with just with the language. There's certainly some people that believe that Tylenol is a major cause of autism. The data does not show that at this point, although that may be true. There's other people that believe that Tylenol has been proven to be safe and that it does not have any connection to autism at all, and that might be true, but the data does not show that either. I mean, I think that both extremes are dangerous to some extent. There are a certain number of studies that have shown that Tylenol is associated with autism, not a cause, but there's an association. In particular, a study that just came out in August of this year looked at 46 other studies. This has been looked at 46 different times, at least, and that the majority of those studies showed that there was an association. So I don't think it's something that we can just dismiss out of hand. On the other hand, autism is extremely complicated. I'm a geneticist. I use whole genomic sequencing. I sequence all of the DNA in every patient that I have, including that of the parents. And I'm very well aware that the autism is extremely complicated and that no 2 patients are the same. Even 2 siblings are going to have different genetics to some extent. So it's more complicated than it is or it is not. And I think that we have to live with some ambiguity here.
Why isn't there data out there? I mean, you mentioned there's no data or not enough data saying that it's bad for you, and the same thing, there's not enough data or no data saying that it won't hurt you.
Oh, well, there's 46 different studies that were looked at in that meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is they didn't look at anyone. They just looked at other studies. They looked at every study that had ever been published in the world that looked at Tylenol, or, it goes by different names, and autism by different names. And then they took the studies that were not obviously completely flawed, and some of them were, and then they put weights on them. And based upon how good the study was, how many patients were in there, and if there were any obvious flaws. And then based upon that information, they came to the conclusion that there appears to be an association. In my mind, that's hard to dismiss. On the other hand, an association doesn't prove causality. In other words, just because they're associated doesn't mean that it's a cause. There could be other reasons that are part of that.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, and obviously it's better to be just cautious. But when I saw those young pregnant women popping the Tylenol tabs, I was thinking, why would you do that? Because what if that is a cause of or attributes to autism on your child? You would never forgive yourself for forever and a day. And I don't understand why they would do it, except for the Trump derangement syndrome, that if Donald Trump says this thing, they're going to, oh, he's wrong. And the reality is both Donald Trump and those people popping those tablets are probably as up to date with the information as the next person. It's the doctors and the researchers like yourself that actually know that there is a maybe and there may be not, and we need to study this more. So I don't understand why the layperson would become, it's a bit like COVID, the layperson became the epidemiologist or the immunologist because they read something on socials. And I think we need to be a little more careful. I mean, were you appalled or were you intrigued by why people would start popping these tablets just to prove Donald Trump wrong?
I've been in the autism world for some time now. I've been treating patients with autism based upon mitochondrial medicine, which is where Tylenol probably gets into there. We can get into that a little later. But I've been treating literally autism for 30 years, and I know that in most of the patients that I treat, they get better. Some of them get dramatically better. Tylenol affects mitochondrial function. That's the energy that the cells need. Energy is life. If the cells don't have the energy, they're not able to function normally, and Tylenol affects energy metabolism. Energy metabolism is thought to be a large part of autism, and in my experience, it's present in most of them. There's a plausible explanation as to why Tylenol might contribute to autism in some children. What you just said is true. What if? I do want to say this is a lot larger than politics or Donald Trump or the Republican Party or the United States. We're talking about millions of kids throughout the entire world that may or may not be at increased risk. Autism, many people with autism are very clever and they don't want to be cured, and that's fine. That's great. I know a lot of those people, but there are other children with autism that have severe intellectual disabilities. They can't speak, and it's very difficult for them and for their families. When I'm talking about autism, I'm mostly talking about the more severe side of it. And in those individuals, this is a very severe disease. These people are, for the most part, the severe ones, are not going to be um, getting married, having children, paying taxes, gainfully employed. They're going to be requiring services, and they need those services. I'm not against it, but that's a major drain on our society and on our economics. And autism is now 1 in 30 children in the United States, but 1 in 31 according to the CDC. These are astronomical numbers. If Tylenol is even 1% of that or so, that we need to know. And it's not that there haven't been studies. There were 46 different studies, but they are somewhat unconclusive. Why? Because autism is so incredibly complex. Everyone has different genes. In some, probably, most of them probably Tylenol doesn't do any, but in some of them it very likely does.
Will we ever, because you just mentioned that it's highly complicated and complex. If it is so complex in each individual case, do you think we'll ever get to the stage where we will have an all-round cure for it or prevention of it?
It would be nice to have a cure, but I like to look at it more of a treatment, like a management. I mean, diabetes is genetic and it's environmental, right? It runs in families. It's a genetic component. But if you're overweight, if you don't exercise, if your weight is, and if you eat the wrong foods, you're more likely to have it. So it's environmental and it's genetic. You take insulin for it, or you take or a diet. As soon as you stop that treatment, you're going to go back to where you were before. There's no cure for diabetes, but it's manageable in most situations. I think autism, to some degree, is manageable today. There are physicians, most of them are in the United States, but I know them all over the world. They go by all different names. They may be called integrative physicians, or they may be MAPS doctors, or there's many different names for them. But they believe that autism is treatable. It is treatable now. I'm one of them. I've been treating autism for 30 years. Treatment is here. You can't cure anybody, and you can't help everybody. But many of them you can help. And in my experience, like I said before, most of them can be helped with what we know today.
Okay, I'm intrigued here. Again, we're just using a general fix for all, but which you can't do. But what's your treatment involve? I mean, each one's going to differ, of course, with the severity of the case. But what's your treatment involve?
Special case. I'm a geneticist. I look at the entire DNA sequence. I mean, all of it, all 3 billion base pairs, and the parents as well. And based upon that, I figure out why that child has autism or some other neurodevelopmental disorder, and then I address that problem directly in that child. That's not available to most people in the world, and there's certainly not that many people like me that can read that and to understand that. For most people that can't do that whole genome, what I recommend is there are certain pathways, like mitochondria, energy metabolism. Most of the patients with autism do have some energy metabolism problems. Sometimes it's genetic. Probably most of the time it's not. It's acquired. It may be environmental, from toxins or who knows what that's in our environment. There are other things about the channels that move salt in and out of the membranes, about the cells talking to each other, neurotransmission, and also inflammation of the brain. Those are all treatable pathways. So in the absence of a DNA sequence, there are different treatments that can be used that address those treatable pathways, and that's what I do.
Can you further explain what energy metabolism is?
Well, I mean, we take food and then we burn the food. And then we use that for everything that we do. Energy is life. Our cells need energy to do just about everything that's being done. It's analogous to an automobile. It's going to burn gasoline and to make energy. We burn fats and we burn carbs mostly. Energy metabolism is the very complex way in which energy is taken out of the food we eat and used for the cells for everything they need: thinking, movement, hormones, everything that we do. It's the taking the energy from the food and using it for what we need to live. That's what energy metabolism is. And energy metabolism is affected in autism. And why would that cause autism? Well, the brain is incredibly electrical. It takes a huge amount of the energy. In a child, the brain may only be about 4% of the weight of the child. It's about 2% of the weight of an adult. But the energy can be up to 50% of the energy that a child is using is being used by the brain. It's very highly electrical, requires a lot of energy. And so if you have any problem with energy metabolism, it's going to be more affected than any other part.
And mitochondrial dysfunction?
But that just means mitochondria are the part that make the energy. Dysfunction just means they're not functioning normally. Mitochondrial dysfunction is a name that's being used for basically there's a problem in energy metabolism.
When you have a severely autistic child, could you just tell us the impact it has on families and the particular individual? Because I mean, it's not just the individual being autistic and having, if it's severe, having problems, throughout the rest of their life. It also impacts on immediate family and family members. Could you just go through those with us, please?
Impact is even larger than that to all of society, as I mentioned before. I know individuals with autism, kids, or they have grown up, that can't speak at all. They can't say a single word. And they were thought to be severely mentally retarded. They thought that they would do nothing. But you put a keyboard in front of them, and some of them can do calculus and get a college degree. But the fact that they cannot communicate verbally at all makes it very difficult to be gainfully employed or to have relationships. So they are very much affected, and their families are affected. Now, not everyone is actually that, many of them have intellectual disabilities of various levels. Some of them are mild, and some of them are very severe, where the children don't even know their own name and they can't walk, and everywhere in between on that. And then certainly there's ones that people have heard about. Some of them are very smart, and some of them are actually incredible geniuses with autism, but they can't keep a job because their social relationships are affected. So it affects the individual and their happiness and their ability to contribute to society. One of the family members, often but not always the mother, quits her job and basically devotes her entire life to that. So that's two people. And then the rest of the family is affected, and we all pay for it, and that there's an individual that's not being able to contribute to society in the way that most of us are fortunate enough to be able to be.
It would seem that there's an increase in autism globally. Why would that be?
That's another controversial area. I can say that there's a lot of people out there that truly believe that autism is not increasing, that you are just seeing more of it because we've heard about it more. And people were given other labels are now given an autism label. And then there's others, like myself included, that say, wait a minute, we're pediatricians. We've been doing this for 30 years. I don't care what label you gave them or no label at all. These kids were just not that common. They weren't 1 in 30 children back then. We saw them every once in a while, but it's not constantly that we were seeing them. I think it's both. There's something that's increasing in society, and it's better recognition. In particular, people say, well, the genes aren't changing that much. It has to be the environment. But on the other hand, most geneticists and most people that are autism scientists say that autism is mostly genetic. The thing is that both of them are true. I published a paper with Dr. Richard Boles and other parts of our group that showed that autism, at least half of it, are new mutations. The genetics is not in the mother, it's not in the father. It's a new mutation in that child. So see, those are genetic, but they're not inherited. What's causing those new mutations? Is it a folate deficiency? Is it heavy metal toxins? Is it plastics or air pollution? The thing is we just don't know. There's not enough information in this area. And this is really, if any of the listeners get anything, I'd like them to know autism is treatable. Find someone who believes that. And we need, as a society, I mean, all over the world, to address this. And not just black or white that's being thrown in the political arena. No, Tylenol is not the cause of autism. And I don't believe that Tylenol can be conclusively said that it's not related. We need to find out, because this is very serious.
Here's the elephant in the room. The COVID vaccinations, I mean, which is gene therapy, even though short-term gene therapy, it is gene therapy. Would they? And again, we're trying to look for a common denominator, which you already can't. You've just said that. But would they be a possible cause for autism?
I haven't seen it at all with that particular vaccination. Since I've seen a very large number of kids with autism, I have seen multiple that have had trouble with other vaccines, childhood vaccines, mostly the measles, mumps, rubella, but other ones as well. All the children are getting vaccinated for the most part. What is the causation, if any? I don't think that vaccines are causing autism either, but I think in some people with susceptible genetics, that it may be a contributing cause along with other causes. So the people on both sides, I think, are muddying the waters. As long as we keep yelling at each other in a political situation, it's just going to go back and forth, and we're not going to get anywhere. I prefer to think of this as a public health crisis, and that we need to do the best to the children. Forget about the right and forget about the left. Let's do the science.
Do you think, this is just a bit of a sidebar here, do you think, I mean, even though you are highly qualified and a leading medical practitioner, researcher, whatever, scientist, but do you think we sort of have moved away from, instead of looking at some of the natural, not when I say natural remedies, I don't mean sitting under a cross or lighting flames above your head or something, but working on things that will prevent such diseases, but we seem to be at times running towards medical science to provide us that short-term answer and fix, such as vaccines. I mean, and I've been, at my age, I was vaccinated against just about everything. But do you think that perhaps that the enthusiasm towards embracing vaccines maybe should be a little bit more tempered than what we are doing at the moment?
I understand what you're saying, but I'm going to take that even further and say that the enthusiasm really needs to be tempered. And that the enthusiasm towards anything is that none of us know everything. I mean, in that we really need to know more than what we do right now. And I would like to see more money in medical research, obviously, because I'm a scientist as well as a practicing physician. I would like to see more careful evaluation of the science that we have. But yeah, we shouldn't be rushing into anything. We should be very carefully getting involved and working towards consensus when we can. And sometimes consensus is not possible until the data is there.
Just finally, what's the difference between autism and Asperger's?
Asperger's used to be where there was a person that was having social issues, but they were actually intelligent, in many cases quite intelligent. So sometimes it would be called high functioning autism. There's many other words for that. The autism word went away because people realized that Dr. Asperger, was a Nazi. And he said some things which were very Nazi-like, and so people said, well, they don't want to use his name in that, so they call it high-functioning autism now. But it's the same thing.
Interesting. It's actually it's a very fascinating subject, but we have run out of time. If somebody wanted to find out more, though, about your writings and autism, and because, as you've said, we don't know enough about it, so the more reading that we can all do, at least will sort of point us in the right position, but not give us all the answers. Where would they go to get that information?
Well, I think there's two places they can go. One would be the MAPS group to find a doctor that. I mean, a lot of your viewers are going to say, "Well, wait a minute, my doctors don't believe this. They think it's crazy." There are doctors out there that believe that. Many of them are in the States, but there's others in Australia and around. It's called MAPS. If you go to medmaps, medmaps.org, you can find physicians on there. And the other thing is regarding treatments, in particular treatments for mitochondrial dysfunction, but also treatments for inflammation and all of those other things. NeuroNeeds.com. I have a conflict of interest because I own part of that, but those are supplements that I made with other physicians and scientists that address mitochondrial dysfunction, and I find that most of my patients do much better on it, and some of them dramatically. So that's just NeuroNeeds, NeuroNeeds, all one word, .com.
Fantastic. I'm going to look at that as soon as we finish. It's been a real pleasure. I have to say, I feel like I've been at my first day of medical school. It's been very enjoyable, and I appreciate your time. Dr. Richard Boles, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
This is The World Today.